Good morning. Oh, actually, not good morning. It's good afternoon, isn't it? And I must say that was one hell of a presentation. I think that presentation, the video from Jason, is something that ought to be shown on every site induction course because there's nothing more moving than seeing firsthand from someone that's experienced that. I think, but anyway, let me start. My name's Lee Sparrow. I'm the managing director of the Vertical Press. We publish Cranes and Access magazine, vertical.net, and we organise safety and working at height events both here and in Germany. We've got an excellent panel today who I'd like to introduce. First of all, Dylan Roberts, who's Director of Health and Safety at Skanska and also representing the UK Contractor Group here today. Then we have Gary Hardwick of Capital Projects, representing the Chartered Institute of Building. Jeff Hook, who's the founder and Secretary General of the British Safety Industry Federation. And finally, Brian Parker, who's Health and Safety Manager at AFI Uplift and also Chairman of the International Power and Access Federation Training Committee. So, just following on from that last discussion, one of the key things I think Jason said was, it won't happen to me. And I think that's critical. I think we all, no one in this room can't say that at one time or other, particularly at home, you probably think, well, it won't happen to me. You've taken a risk, you've gone up a ladder, you've stood on something instead of used a proper piece of equipment. We've all done it. And that's the problem. The problem gets worse when it goes on to a company, when it gets into a job site where contractors, particularly if you look at the subject, in tough economic times, when there's a temptation to cut corners, because it won't happen to me, it won't happen to us. So contractors do take risks, they take shortcuts to the equipment. We know it happens, because 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, they get away with it, and they would have saved some money. Of course, that 1 or 2 times out of 10, they don't get away with it, and something happens, like happened to Jason. And the impact of something like that happen is not just what happened, as if that's not profound enough. But it has the impact, as we saw on that video, on the families, the colleagues, and the companies themselves. Not to mention the loss on the job site. It costs far, far more after a serious accident like that than the money that was saved by cutting the corner, by using the wrong equipment, by using a generic risk assessment rather than looking at it properly. But anyway, the key thing, I think we'll start off, well, a good place to kick off perhaps, is the title of the discussion today, Maintaining Effective Work at Height Policies in a Tough Economic Environment. I think that word maintaining, I know several of our panelists feel strongly about the use of maintaining. And Dylan, perhaps I know you feel that we shouldn't be maintaining effective work at height policies.
Yes, well, clearly my view is that we can't just maintain. I suppose you could argue maintaining is that we're going to keep them as good as they need to be. But I think the real challenge to the industry is to improve and keep on improving on the standards, because maintaining it to me implies that we've got there and what we're doing now today is good enough. And certainly our experience as UKCG is it's not good enough. We have to improve. And I think the economic climate hopefully gives us an opportunity to actually innovate and find safer and more efficient ways of working, and that we can't just sit back and blame a recession or the economic downturn on why we're not improving. And there's some challenges with our clients as well, in terms of our clients are demanding higher standards during this time. But they're expecting it to be done safer, but they're expecting a cheaper product at the end of the day as well. So I won't sit here thinking and putting a mantra out that we've got to get better. I clearly understand there's some huge challenges in terms of the economy, but unless we take a lead as UKCG in improving standards, then we're going to see, unfortunately, more people like Jason in this industry, which is totally unacceptable to everybody.
Gary, so many microphones here. Gary, I know that you feel that actually standards haven't particularly changed over the last 2 years of recession, or
Well, in steel erection business, we've made some tremendous steps forward from getting people off the open steel work. I mean, now we're working from MOOPs, we've got harnesses in there, and we've worked with manufacturers as well to bring on, you know, we've got deck riders and we've got things like the CIOB system that's coming in. We've made great advances, but I think the economic downturn, if you like, has made these more of a floodgate into a sort of a trickle, really. We're always looking forward, but I think the systems we've got in place are good. Going forward, to make these smaller increases is much more expensive, and I think that's at the moment where we are with that.
How do you combine that, though, Gary, with the fact that costs? I mean, there's a lot of pressure on contract costs. There's a lot and there's less work about, so it's more competitive.
Yeah.
And
well, as a contractor, all the tendering teams, they'll go forward, and the cost is an issue, as you've just rightly been pointing out. But once we get actually onto the site ourselves, actually on site, we provide all our own access equipment, our own harnesses, our own trained guys. So really, once we're on site, we're kind of not left alone, but we're left to get on with it. And the systems we've got in place are pretty robust and sort of in line with regulations and going forward as well.
So you're saying it's not necessary, it needn't be a cost.
No,
necessary
I mean,
to do it properly.
No. I mean, for ourselves, we turn up with our own equipment anyway, so we're working to our own procedures and our own standards, using our own equipment. So really, that doesn't the sort of knocking back safety for cost doesn't really impact on us like that. And again, all our work is work at height, so you know, people are quite twitchy when they see the work at height and don't really want to cut back on that aspect of it.
Brian, I mean, you represent, in addition to being on the chairman of the committee, IPAF, the International Powered Access Federation training chairman, you represent or work for a rental company, or an access equipment, a work at height equipment rental company. I mean, how do you gel the need for more sophisticated equipment, more modern equipment, with the fact that rental rates are under pressure as well as contract rates?
I think we're all feeling tough economic times. As mentioned earlier, I'm the UK Training Committee Chairman. Wherever we look at, technology is moving forward, yet there's always going to be a lot of machines that are out there, historic machines that have got less sophisticated systems fitted to them. Training for me is going to be the important factor of where I believe that we need to maintain and keep training people, but I do fear sometimes that due to the economic climate, there are experienced people who are, to all intents and purposes, more expensive to keep, and what tends to happen is they are either made redundant, probably see the writing on the wall and jump ship to another company, which invariably means that, you know, less experienced people are then trained. They then come through machines that we have and we put out on hire, and are trained appropriately. But we've seen incidents, accidents quite regularly with people being hurt. And clearly the topic of today is maintaining effective policies. It's a big game for all rental companies to maintain the margins, but also to offer that quality service to their customers.
Do you notice a difference with, I mean, you do the training, most of the training you would do would be operator training, right? Am I right?
Generally, mainly operator training takes up probably 95 to 96% of our courses. We can basically do a varied range of training, but one thing that I do think that we do miss a trick on is getting people trained to be able to become demonstrators. So they have the ability to familiarise operators on machines, and of course management training. So the IPAF Mutes for Managers course, getting people trained. I, along with IPAF in 2005, was one of the co-writers of that course, and it didn't really take off particularly well. But I'm happy to say now we're doing a lot more of them, and it always astounds me still at the end of a Mutes Managers course that that manager who's been having mutes on their site for God knows how many years goes, crikey, I didn't realise my responsibilities, and it frightens them. So,
Jeff, I know that you feel that inspections of machines is an issue, and that too many companies owning machines or renting machines think that an assurance inspection is all that's required.
I think, sadly, there's some misunderstandings in this area. I mean, the British Safety Industry Federation has within it companies who do training, but primarily we're on the supply side of kit and equipment, stuff like that. So I'm in a slightly different situation to my colleagues here today. But one of the things that's vitally important to the supply side is that the kit that they produce actually gets used in a proper situation, gets deployed, it works, and there are no issues or problems around that, because it doesn't do them any good if someone has an accident. And I think following the rather harrowing presentation that we just had from Jason, it focused for me the fact that there are sort of two legs to this particular situation. There's the one where the employee perhaps has an accident. It may be a life-changing situation, but his family has to deal with it. And in fact, the other side of this penny is the employer, and I'm presuming we're talking about people in employment rather than people who are just running their own businesses, because that's the way most of the construction industry works. And the employer effectively, at the end of a situation that Jason's been through, he washes his hands off it. The insurance company pays the compensation. He may get a fine or something like that, or he may just get an improvement notice. But the key thing about this is that if you're working on tight margins, it's absolutely vitally important that the risk assessment is done well, that the procedures put in place are good, that the kit that's deployed is correct, not counterfeit or illegal or anything like that, that it works as it should do. Because I have to tell you, the disruption, the cost, and everything associated with someone having an accident is something you really want to avoid, because it goes off the margin. So and you led me in on the insurance certificates. A lot of people in the construction industry, it's dangerous areas, and so you're insured for the risk, and the insurance company insists on coming down and having a look. They sometimes give you a certificate, and that is assumed to be a certificate that tells you that you are operating correctly, within the law, etc., etc. Unfortunately, the insurance companies have a slightly different view. The reason they do the inspection is to correctly evaluate the financial risk to them in the event that something goes wrong. And it is not a license to operate. It gives you the insurance, but it doesn't mean to say they're necessarily any more expert than you. And in our experience, they're often less expert in the actual jobs that you're carrying out, the way that you're doing them. So I suppose the message from me in this is twofold. Avoid accidents at all costs, because they reduce margin in one way, shape or form. And always do a double check, even though you've got an insurer certificate. All that says is he insures you. It doesn't say that you're necessarily doing it correctly. And if you think I'm in doubt on that, ask your insurer, and they will run a mile from it.
Dylan, I know, getting back to training, I know you've got a view that at times like this, it's one of the things which is easiest to cut, or cut corners on, or reduce.
I think, of course, there's a potential at this time that employers might provide the minimum level of training rather than a higher standard. And certainly I'd agree with what was said about the IPAF MOOPs for managers. We've successfully run that within Skanska, and I know my colleagues in UKCG are, and the explanation that was given regarding people becoming more aware of their responsibilities is what we found. And people, the managers and supervisors on site, we owe them a duty to make them aware of their responsibilities and to inform them and engage them and everything else. And they appreciated that aspect of it. So as UKCG, we're committed to raising the competency and the standards of all of our workforce, whether it be supply chain or our own direct staff, and that's going to be a differentiator in the future as well. The experiences that we're having, and I agree with what was said with Jeff there in terms of the systems and processes and the machinery, etc. The experiences we're having is that we've got trained and competent people on site. We've got equipment that's well managed. We're, dare I say, be brave enough to say that we're using, some of the larger, more reputable organisations to provide us with our plant and equipment. And we demand high standards from those. So the accidents and instances we're having in our business, when we're asking, is he competent? Has he got risk assessment? Did he understand the task? Is the equipment well maintained, in good order? If you're going through a tick box exercise, you get to the end and you go, yeah, those were in place. And we get very much onto the topic of Jason's, and I'd have been happy to let Jason have my portion of this half hour. But if we get into Jason's point, it's about choice and the choices that people make. And that's, going off a little bit, the maintaining, working at high standards area. But those standards are very, very good, I believe now, speak on behalf of UKCG anyway, are very good. And we've got to get through this next hurdle now, which is really convincing people that yes, it is about insurance costs, but it's not just about insurance costs. It's about the managers in the organisations really wanting to have people going home every day in the same condition as they arrived that morning. And people are very passionate about that. And that's the holy grail. I'd love to stand here and give the answer to that one, because we're working very hard to try and move on to that next bit. And it's a huge investment. Cost investment, it's not going to come very easily. So our role in UKCG is to demand, I'll make no excuses for that, competency levels of all the people, the right equipment, higher levels of maintenance, evolution and design of things like MUPS, which I know many of us are aware of changes in that area now, and there's some great technological advances going on. Our commitment is to doing that and demanding the same of our supply chain partner. And that has to feed back down then to the 4 or 5 man band outfits, the 1-man band, whatever it may be. And if we demand high standards, then it'll actually improve the standard of the industry.
Well, why, 3 of you gentlemen represent major building institutions or federations, associations. Why, taking on Brian's point, that the take-up on the IPAF MUPS for Managers course, or courses of that type, is low and would you say falling?
I would think at the moment it is falling slightly, but we did see last year it increase.
So, given the importance of that, why is that our contractors not taking it?
My very direct answer to that is that we killed somebody on one of our projects in July of 2008, and working in a mobile elevated work platform. And as part of the investigation into that incident, we looked at what more we could do, and we looked at what was out in industry and the areas that we could improve on. And one of the outcomes of that was working and implementing that. And I suppose when we move to being more proactive in every area of health and safety, then the world will be a better place. But sometimes we are still reactive. That was our personal experience. And we've done a lot of work with CPA. We played a significant part in getting the new MUPS document from CPA put together. And later on this year, we're going to be making a commitment to only certain types of MUPS being allowed onto our projects and sites. So it's, sometimes events mean that you make a change.
That's a critical point, isn't it? Some of the safest companies out there, contractor-wise or industry-wise, are companies that have had a bad accident in the past and seen the effect. How do you get that across to all the 9 out of 10 that have got away with it in the past? I mean, Gary, I don't know if you...
Well, I mean, the thing with us really is to get guys trained and competent. I mean, we've got our own internal training and we do external training as well. So it's just looking at what we think the guys need on site. Myself, I'm a site-based safety advisor, so I sit on the site as well, and we're walking around all the time on making sure that the guys are doing as they're supposed to be doing, really. I think in the past, when we had the big building projects, then we had a lot of people in who probably weren't or shouldn't have been working there. Now we've cut down with the sort of contraction of work. We've actually got down to a core of guys who we feel they're the most competent, trained, and generally sort of all at one with safety and the working environment. So I think costs have contracted us down, but we've contracted down into a core of very good workers who are very safety aware.
It's getting that across to other smaller contractors and smaller companies, isn't it? I mean, Brian, you mentioned, and I know the fact that risk assessments. On risk assessments, these are just, there's a tendency to do the paperwork, which you still see on some major sites. The tendency to do the paperwork, the risk assessment, generic. Is that what would generics risk assessments rather than really good, thought through, specific ones?
Yeah, I think often, having visited 2 fatalities with the company that I work for people that have used our equipment, and kind of dissected what risk assessments they had at the time, they were accidents that were, preventable. Often the risk assessment is for the task, but doesn't incorporate the method of getting there. And in this case, in our particular case, was scissor lifts. And when looking and dissecting into what actually happened and how it happened, there was no reference at all as to how they were going to get up there. It was just a cherry picker, they called it. It was actually a cherry picker, but it was a scissor lift they were using. That terminology was wrong. But, the generic side of it worries me immensely when I go in there and see, what they perceive to be adequate risk assessments and method statements. And even more worrying is when they have no rescue plan, no method of getting that person down if something went wrong. And in one of the particular cases, that was the reason that the person is no longer with us.
Jeff, I know risk assessment and equipment selection is something that's hot for you at the British safety.
Yes, I think the excuse me. I think the difficulty with the selection, deployment of kit and the risk assessment that's done, and indeed the lack of eagerness, shall we say, to get involved in the training of people, all that. There is a cultural element to this, that with the smaller companies, they either are not fully appreciative of what the risk actually is, or the motivation to actually deal with it is relatively low. We're a lot better today than we were in, say, 75 when the Act came out, but we have a long way to go, I guess. My more recent experience is actually in a different field, where, and we're talking respiratory protection in actual fact, which doesn't affect you guys to a great degree. But the interesting thing about respiratory protection is that if you use the wrong kit, you die, or you could do. And about 50% of the organisations that should use some sort of respiratory protection don't. And of the 50% that do, they don't understand what they're doing. I cannot help but feel a similar reflection will be in the height safety field, where people won't be aware of what the problem is and therefore not aware of the question to ask. And anything that we could do, we'd love to help, but it's very diffused.
Do you not think, and this is open to anyone, and any questions from the floor, do you not think that there's a case that sometimes producing a paper risk assessment actually it's counterproductive, because you've got the piece of paper, so everything's okay? Instead of doing a proper risk assessment, well, there's a tendency just to do the paperwork.
Certainly we feel that.
Gary?
Well, I disagree really. I think now, years ago, work exercise, and regulate stuff like think people now look at the risk and like my microphone.
Yeah.
Should anything go wrong, that is where that's what we're going to stand up in court to defend ourselves with. So I think now people are very, very conscious of the risk assessment being correct for the work they're doing, and it's laid out and formatted correctly.
Sounds as though the problem is there's a gulf between some companies like your own, if you like, and a lot of other everyday contractors out there, with totally different standards, which is something where the UKCG, I think, would come in. It's just get that consistency, isn't it?
It is, and I think the guys who might be working on a UKCG site today may be making life change or whatever, and working on a smaller project next week or whatever. So it's getting those people to always work to those standards, irrespective of where they're working, and getting into their behaviour and the culture. And if they set up on their own, whatever it may be, that they take that away with them. And our challenge as UKCG and as Skanska is to make that as less a burden as is possible for the individual who's doing the risk assessment, so that he actually gets some value out of it. And again, they're easy things to say, but we've got to make it simpler, easier, and not make people do and discuss risks that are not significant, because that's been one of the histories in the past. So if they see a value in it, they'll keep doing it, and they'll do it whether they're on a large job or a small job. So that's a big challenge for all of us to make sure that's right.
I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. I would like to talk about accident investigation and a lot of other things, but just one question for each of you. I know on most major sites you've got fairly intensive induction processes with anyone coming on site. Would showing something like Jason's film there not be far better than some of the induction going on?
Well, I'd like to jump straight in there, because I've got one of my MDs with me. We've seen the film, and we're actually looking to purchase it just for our own guys. As a toolbox stock or an induction, I think that'll be something we should use across the whole industry, because it's succinct, direct, to the point. And Jason used some quite colourful language on there that the guys on the ground understand, So yeah, I think fantastic DVD. I'd love to get Jason around to every site I've ever been on, because I'm sure that would make a change.
We all agree on. I mean, it does bring it home compared with a lot of the...
That's correct. We've got to move from talking to people about Baal's disease when they turn up on a large construction site and those type of things, and get on to what's really important. We've recently changed our inductions so that people are going out onto site and walking around the project, and having less time sitting in the office talking about the project. Go out there, feel it, and see what's actually going on, and meet with the people who are actually doing the activities or managing the activities. And using, again, as say, people like Jason and Ian Whittingham, who many of you, I'm sure, knew of. We worked with Ian for many years, going around and talking to our people on site. So we have to be smarter, I think, and use better media to communicate our message, especially as we've got younger people coming up into our industry as well, who are far more au fait with new medias and ways of learning than maybe I am.
It's getting away from that thing that you mentioned, in the fear of raising the issue because you've been made fun of, getting the piss take out of you, as you said. And I think that's a key. It's a culture thing, as you said, Jeff, I think, isn't it? Well, I think we've run out of time, so I'd just like to thank all of the participants in our panel today. I don't know if there's any time for questions.